Something happened last night while you were sleeping, while you were lying there, believing everything between you and the person you love was exactly where it needed to be. Something was happening somewhere else. A conversation, a moment, a truth that was never supposed to reach you, because last night, the person you love was sitting with their friends. The room was filled with laughter, music, unfinished conversations, and the kind of honesty that only appears when people stop pretending. The drinks were flowing, the walls were coming down, and then one of their friends said your name, not in a casual way, not like a simple mention. They said your name in a way that made the entire mood change, a way that made your person stop smiling for just a second, a way that made everyone at that table realize something important. Something about you, something about your relationship, something about the feelings that have been hidden beneath the surface for longer than you know. And before you think this is just another story about betrayal or secrets, stay with me. Because what happened that night was not as simple as it seems. The truth is deeper, much deeper. You see, sometimes the most important conversations in our lives happen when we are not there to hear them. Sometimes the people closest to us notice things we refuse to see, the small changes, the quiet moments, the things that are felt but never spoken, and last night, their friends noticed something about the person you love. Something they had been trying to hide. Imagine the scene, a table surrounded by familiar faces, the lights are low, everyone is relaxed. Everyone is laughing, your person is sitting there, holding a drink, smiling at stories from the past. For a moment, they look free, like someone who has forgotten all their worries. But their friends know them. They know the difference between a real smile and a smile someone uses to cover what they are feeling. And one friend noticed something, a hesitation, a distance. A moment where your person looked at their phone but didn't send the message they wanted to send. A moment where they almost said something about you, but stopped. Have you ever wondered what people say about you when you are not in the room? Not the polite things, not the things people say directly to your face, but the honest things, the thoughts they reveal when they believe you will never know. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't come out during serious conversations. Sometimes it slips out during a random night, during a laugh, during a pause, during a moment when someone asks the question everyone has been avoiding. And that's exactly what happened. One of their friends leaned forward. They looked at your person carefully, and they asked a simple question, a question that seemed harmless, but it wasn't. They asked, "Are you really happy?" The table became quiet, not completely silent, but quiet enough that everyone noticed. Because everyone knew what the question was really about. It wasn't about life, it wasn't about work, it wasn't about anything else. It was about you, your connection, your future, the love you both have been building. Your person laughed at first. That nervous laugh people make when they are trying to escape a question that touched something real. They looked away, they took another sip, they tried to change the subject. But their friend didn't let them. Because sometimes the people who love us the most are the ones who are brave enough to ask the questions we avoid. They said, "You always talk about them. But why does it feel like you're afraid to let them get closer?" And that sentence changed everything. Because your person didn't answer immediately. And that silence said more than words ever could. You know that kind of silence, the kind where someone's heart is speaking before their mouth can. The kind where a person is fighting between telling the truth and protecting themselves. Because maybe the person you love has been carrying something you never knew about. Maybe they haven't been distant because they stopped caring. Maybe they have been distant because they care more than they know how to handle. And that's where the night became different. The jokes stopped. The laughter became softer. The conversation became real. One friend looked at them and said something that made them uncomfortable. Something that forced them to look at the relationship differently. They said, "You know they would do anything for you, right?" Your person looked down. Because deep inside,
They knew.
they knew you had been there, they knew you had given patience, They knew you had offered love even during moments when they were difficult to understand. But then the friend continued, and this next part is the reason this conversation mattered. They said, "But do you realize how much they are waiting for you?" And those words hit differently, because sometimes we don't lose people because we don't love them. Sometimes we lose them because we make them wait too long, we make them prove their love too many times, we make them carry a relationship that was supposed to be carried by two people. Your person stayed quiet. Because somewhere inside, they knew there was truth in those words. But the biggest truth of the night was still hidden. Because their friends weren't only talking about what you were doing. They were talking about what your person was feeling. And what they said next was something your person never expected to hear. Something that made them question everything. Because one friend looked at them and said, "I think you're not scared of losing them." A pause, a long pause. Then they continued, "I think you're scared because you know they are the one person who actually sees you." And that sentence changed the entire room, because maybe that was the real reason. Maybe the person you love wasn't running away from you. Maybe they were running away from being truly seen, from being vulnerable, from showing the parts of themselves they thought nobody could love. And the truth is, the people we love the most are often the people who scare us the most. Because they have the power to hurt us, they have the power to see us, they have the power to matter. And last night, sitting there with their friends, your person finally faced something they had been avoiding. Something about you. Something about themselves, something about the love between you. But the conversation wasn't finished, because after that moment, after that silence, their friend asked the one question that would reveal everything. A question your person couldn't escape. And their answer would change the way you see this entire story, because the truth about what their friends said about you is still coming. The room became quiet after those words, because everyone at that table knew something had been uncovered, something your person had been trying to hide, not from you, from themselves. The friend who asked the question didn't look angry. They didn't look like someone trying to criticize. They looked like someone who had watched this story unfold from the outside. Someone who had seen the moments you never saw, the conversations you never heard, the emotions your person never admitted. And sometimes, the people standing outside the relationship can see what the two people inside it cannot. They see the effort, they see the pain, they see the love, and they see the distance growing between two people who still care about each other. Your person held their glass quietly. They weren't drinking anymore, because suddenly the alcohol wasn't enough to distract them. The laughter wasn't enough to hide behind. The night that started as a simple gathering with friends had become a mirror. And that mirror was showing them something they weren't ready to face. One friend looked at them and said, "Do you know what they say about you when you're not around?" Your person's eyes moved up, almost like they were afraid of the answer, because deep down, they knew. They knew you had always protected their image. You had always spoken about them with love. Even during the moments when you were hurt, even during the moments when you felt alone, the friend continued, they defend you. A pause. They make excuses for you. Another pause. And that's the problem. Because sometimes love becomes dangerous when one person keeps understanding everything, while the other person forgets they need to be understood too. Your person looked away, because those words touched something real. Something uncomfortable. Something they had been ignoring. Maybe you had been feeling it too. Maybe you had noticed the little things, the slower replies, the moments when they seemed emotionally far away, the times when you wanted reassurance, but instead received silence. And maybe you told yourself, "They're just tired, they have a lot going on, they'll come back to me." Because that's what people do when they love someone. They search for explanations before accepting painful possibilities. They protect the person they love, sometimes even from the truth. But that night, their friends were not trying to destroy the relationship. They were trying to save it, because they saw something important. They saw that your person cared. But they also saw that caring was not enough. Love is not only about feelings, love is about actions, love is about showing up, love is about making someone feel chosen. And your person had forgotten something. They had forgotten that being loved is a responsibility. The friend leaned closer and asked, "When was the last time you made them feel loved without them having to ask?" That question stayed in the air. Because there are some questions that don't need an immediate answer. They already know the answer. Your person looked down, and for the first time that night, they admitted something. Something they had never said out loud. They said, "I know I've been distant." The table became silent. They continued, "I know they've felt it." Another pause. "But I didn't know how to fix it." And there it was, the truth hidden underneath everything. Not a lack of love, not a lack of feelings, fear. Your person wasn't ignoring you because you didn't matter. They were struggling because you mattered too much. They were afraid of failing you, afraid that one day you would look at them and realize they weren't everything you believed they were. Have you ever noticed how sometimes the people who love us the most, who push us away? Not because they want to lose us, but because they believe losing us later will hurt less than disappointing us now. It's not logical, it's not fair. But it's human, and that was the battle happening inside your person. Their friends saw it. They saw someone who loved you, but was trapped inside their own fears. But then another friend said something that changed the entire conversation. Something that made your person freeze. They said, "Being afraid doesn't give you permission to make someone else feel alone." And those words were different. Because they weren't comforting. They were honest, and sometimes honesty hurts before it heals. Your person stayed quiet because they knew. They knew you had been waiting for them to open up. Waiting for them to choose you without hesitation. Waiting for them to show you that your love wasn't being given to someone who was slowly letting it disappear. The friend continued. "You keep saying you're scared of losing them. But what are you doing to make sure they stay?" And that question hit harder than anything else, because fear is easy. Fear explains everything. Fear explains silence. Fear explains distance. Fear explains hesitation. But fear doesn't build a relationship. Only courage does. Only honesty does. Only two people choosing each other every day can create something that lasts. Your person looked at their phone. Your name was still there. The last message you sent, the last conversation, the last moment, when you were trying to connect with them, and suddenly they realized something. They had been waiting for the perfect moment to tell you how they felt. But the perfect moment never comes. Sometimes you have to create it. One friend noticed them looking at the phone, and they asked, "Have you told them?" Your person shook their head. "No." "Why?" And the answer came quietly, almost like a confession. "Because what if I tell them everything? And they realize they deserve someone better?" The room went silent. Because that wasn't the answer of someone who didn't care. That was the answer of someone who was terrified. Terrified that love would expose every weakness they had spent years hiding. Their friend looked at them and said, "Maybe they don't need someone perfect. Maybe they just need someone who is honest." And that sentence stayed with them, because sometimes we spend so much time trying to become someone worthy of love, that we forget love was never asking us to be perfect. It was asking us to be real. The night continued, the drinks became empty, the conversations became deeper, but something had changed. Your person wasn't defending themselves anymore. They were listening. They were finally seeing the relationship from your side. And then came the moment that would change everything. The friend who started the conversation looked at them and asked one final question. A question that would reveal whether they were ready to fight for you, or whether they were ready to let you go. They asked, "If you woke up tomorrow and they were gone, what would hurt more? Losing them, or knowing you never gave them everything they deserved?" Your person's face changed, because sometimes the truth doesn't break your heart. Sometimes it wakes it up. They sat there quietly, thinking about every memory, every laugh, every moment you chose them, every time you stayed. Every time you loved them even when they were difficult to love. And then, they finally said something. Something that none of their friends expected. Something that would lead to the message you would receive the next morning, because after that night, your person wasn't the same. The conversation was over. But the truth had only begun, and what happened when they woke up, what they typed, and what they finally admitted to you, was the one thing they had been too afraid to say, because sometimes the most important words, in a relationship, are the words we almost never send. And your person's phone was about to become the place where everything changed. The night was finally over, the laughter had faded, the glasses were empty, the friends had gone home. But the conversation, that conversation stayed. Because sometimes one honest moment can follow a person into the next morning, and change the way they see everything. And when your person woke up, they didn't wake up the same. They opened their eyes. But the first thing they felt wasn't the usual rush of the day, it was the weight of everything they had heard, every question, every truth, every word their friends said about you. They laid there staring at the ceiling, replaying the night in their mind. The moment they were asked if they were truly happy, the moment they realized you had been giving more than they had been showing, the moment their friend said, "You're not afraid of losing them. You're afraid of being loved by someone who actually sees you," and that sentence stayed with them, because it was true. You saw them. Not the version they showed everyone else. Not the confident version, not the version that pretended everything was okay. You saw the person behind the walls. The person who had fears. The person who had doubts. The person who sometimes didn't believe they were enough. And maybe that's why they were scared. Because being seen is beautiful. But being seen also feels terrifying when you are carrying things you haven't healed from. Your person reached for their phone. The screen lit up. And there it was. Your name, the person who had been waiting. The person who had been patient. The person who had loved them through moments when they weren't easy to love. Their finger hovered over your name. They wanted to call. They wanted to explain everything. They wanted to tell you what happened. But fear came back. That old fear, the one that always stopped them. What if it's too late? What if they don't believe me? What if I hurt them too much? Have you ever noticed something about people? Sometimes they don't stay silent because they don't have anything to say. Sometimes they stay silent because they have too much to say. Because when emotions become too big, words become difficult. But then your person remembered something their friend said before leaving. A sentence that changed everything. They said, "You don't protect someone by hiding the truth from them. You protect them by giving them a reason to trust you." And finally, they understood. They had been calling their silence protection. But maybe their silence was actually creating distance. Maybe the thing they were afraid would push you away was the exact thing that was already creating space between you. Honesty, vulnerability, truth. Their hands started moving. They opened the message box. They typed, then deleted, typed again, deleted again, because how do you explain months of emotions in one message? How do you tell someone, "I love you, but I was scared. I needed you, but I didn't know how to show it. I wanted you close, but I kept building walls"? How do you explain that sometimes the heart can want something while fear fights against it? Finally, they stopped trying to find perfect words. Because perfect words were never what you needed. You needed real ones. And they typed, "I need to tell you something." Your heart would have raced seeing those words, because messages like that always create 1,000 questions. Is something wrong? Did something happen? Are they leaving? But you didn't know yet. You didn't know that behind those words was not an ending, it was a beginning. Your person continued typing, "I talked about us last night." A pause. "I know that sounds strange, but my friends ask me questions I have been avoiding." They looked at the screen, took a deep breath, and continued. "They made me realize something. I have been so afraid of losing you that I forgot to show you that I choose you." And those words carried everything. Everything they had never said. Everything they had hidden, everything they were finally brave enough to admit. They told you about the conversation, not every detail. But enough for you to understand. Their friends weren't trying to separate you. They weren't trying to put doubts in their mind. They were trying to remind them of something important. That love cannot survive only on feelings, it needs effort, it needs attention. It needs two people willing to show up. Then your person wrote something that made the biggest difference. Something simple, something honest. They said, "I don't want you to love the version of me that I pretend to be. I want you to know the real me. The scared me. The imperfect me. The person who is still learning how to love you the way you deserve." And maybe that was the truth you needed to hear. Not a promise that everything would suddenly become perfect. Not a fantasy where there would never be problems again. But something real, someone willing to try, someone willing to grow, someone willing to stop hiding, because the strongest relationships aren't built by two perfect people. They're built by two people who are honest enough to say, "I have flaws. I have fears, but I still choose you." Your person finished the message, but before sending it, they paused one more time, because this was the moment. The moment where they either returned to old habits, or finally changed. They thought about losing you. Not because they were afraid of being alone, but because they realized something. Life without you would mean losing someone who believed in them when they struggled to believe in themselves. Someone who stayed when leaving would have been easier. Someone who loved them before they learned how to fully love themselves, and then they pressed send. The message was gone. The truth was no longer trapped inside their heart, it was now in your hands. And maybe you read it with tears in your eyes. Maybe you read it more than once, maybe you felt every emotion at the same time, pain, relief, love, hope, because finally, you weren't guessing anymore, you weren't wondering anymore, you weren't trying to understand silence anymore, you had the truth. And the truth was this: the person you love was not sitting with their friends because they wanted to escape you. They were sitting there because they were finally forced to face what they had been avoiding. They realized your love was not something to take for granted, it was something to protect, something to appreciate, something to fight for. But remember this: love is not proven by one emotional conversation. It is proven by what happens after. The message is only the beginning. The real story starts when two people decide to change. When actions finally match words. When love becomes something you both create instead of something only one person carries. So if someone you love ever seems distant, if they seem quiet, if they seem lost inside themselves, remember that sometimes people are fighting battles you cannot see. But also remember, you deserve a love that chooses you, a love that meets you halfway, a love that doesn't make you constantly question your worth, because the person who truly loves you will not only fear losing you, they will make sure they never give you a reason to leave. And maybe that was the real thing their friends said that night. Not a secret, not a betrayal, a reminder that love is fragile, a reminder that good people can still hurt the people they love, and a reminder that sometimes one honest conversation can save something two hearts almost lost, because last night, the person you love was drunk with their friends. And their friends said something about you. Something they desperately needed to hear. Something that changed everything.